Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Corritis. Today is May 27th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy Memorial Day. Wasn't sure if I was going to do a podcast today, but you know what? I have that ad up on Facebook that I've been talking about in regards to the letter that I had written to the president. Check that out on thecapitalnews.com, the capitalnews.com website. It's also on our LinkedIn page, YouTube videos. This podcast, obviously, that I read on episode 71, I was able to take the time to read that aloud, so I definitely thank everybody who took the time to listen to that podcast, and thank you for all of you guys out there who took the time to actually read the letter. I was hoping to elevate the conversation. That's what I attempt to do here with this podcast, and I was hoping to do so through the medium of social media. Why? Because, well, that's where everybody is nowadays. So everything that I post, my letters, any articles, these podcasts, they get distributed to iTunes, my website, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, it's there. So I took the time because I wanted to spread the word a little bit in regards to my letter that I had taken the time to write to the president. And obviously disperse it and then to hear some people's thoughts. Well, unfortunately, and we've been discussing this for the past couple of weeks since this has been quote-unquote an advertisement, I guess you could say. It was a boosted note on Facebook to reach as many people as possible. And again, I was hoping to elevate the conversation and to have some constructive criticism of the letter, support, and obviously I'm ready for people to be upset perhaps by it or to agree with it in total or in part. But really, that's not what happened, and we've been discussing that a couple times here on this podcast. Unfortunately, I think most people who took to this link to this letter, they read the headline, they saw the picture of the president, and they just went off. I think this is, it's a shame because I think this is a big problem in this country right now because the letter, while lengthy, I think you could have gotten the gist of it, even if you just read half of it, or if you took the time to listen to the podcast where I just read it to you if you don't like to read. A lot of people jumped the gun. I would say I got a few hundred comments. I took the time this weekend to go through most of them. Of them, you're talking 5 or 6, so let's just call it a half a dozen of comments that were thought out, that probably actually read the letter, listened to the podcast, or at least part of it. Some people think I'm a conservative. Some people think I'm a liberal. Of course, that's fine for me because I'm neither. I'm a libertarian. Some people, I think, should have reread it because their analysis of the letter was mistaken, quite frankly. I mean, you can have your opinion, that's fine. But given how they articulated their argument against it or their quote-unquote criticism of the letter, I think they should have taken a little bit more time and been a little bit more thoughtful because here's the big concern that's taking place. I don't think that this can really be argued. I think we are in a country that is highly divisive right now. You have your silos that I talk about. You have people who watch MSNBC all day, and you have people who watch Fox News all day, and that's all you hear. So on MSNBC, Donald Trump can't do anything right. He couldn't tell you what today is. He just couldn't. And if he did, they'd say, well, it depends on the time zone, and they'd blame him for something else. So MSNBC, Donald Trump can't do anything right. If he is, it's like a broken clock. He's right twice a day. That would be about it. If there's any such idea or issue or statement that he has made where they might actually agree with him. On the other side, you have Fox News. So depending on who you're listening to, but let's just say really the commentary avenue, so your late night programming, probably really from 5 o'clock onward, you have a lot of people who make comments who just support the president. And on that side, the president can do no wrong. This is very destructive to our society because what we have been in, and I think probably really since President Obama, has been the cult of personality. And the cult of personality is very, very dangerous to a constitutional republic or any type of democratic government for that matter. We are a constitutional republic. At least we are on paper. Are we in practice? Not really, unfortunately. So the cult of personality is very dangerous because all you have to understand is a brief history of some cults, cult leaders, You drink in the Kool-Aid, mass suicides, people who become brainwashed to commit crimes, murders even. It's not pretty. It really isn't, and that's why it's so destructive to any type of democratic government. So you could argue, I think, because of the situation that the country was in post and during the presidency of George W. Bush, we were in the midst of the great financial crisis. We had 9/11. We had the war on terror that persists to this day with seemingly no end in sight, unfortunately, and now we are saber-rattling in Venezuela and in Iran. So this is an unfortunate line of events that we have to discuss here on a daily basis, unfortunately. Again, let's hope and pray that we do not enter another war. We're already going bankrupt, but nevertheless, we don't need the lives lost on either side for that matter. So the cult of personality, I think, really took form following and maybe during the latter years of the George W. Bush presidency, and that gave rise to someone like Barack Obama, somebody who had virtually zero experience doing anything, unfortunately. Yes, he was a senator. Yes, he was apparently some sort of intellect from our Ivy Leagues with a law degree. He was a community organizer. His ideas were counter to the founding of this country, especially that with free market capitalism. But nevertheless, people were hungry for somebody to change the system. That was his slogan, Hope and Change, remember? Very vague and very deliberate, because hope and change allows you, the individual, to prescribe anything you want to those words. I hope for X. I want to change Y. So whatever you put up there, Obama was fine with you thinking whatever it was as long as you voted for him. And a lot of people did vote for him because they were tired of the system. They were tired of the war. They were tired of the economic situation with the bailouts. And unfortunately, Barack Obama continued with the bailouts of Wall Street and institutions that really stuck it to the American people and actually the global economy. So those who were responsible got bailed out to the tune of trillions of dollars. And quite frankly, many of them are still being bailed out through low interest rates and quantitative easing. And now we have a president who is now calling for more interest rate cuts and more quantitative easing. The very things that are causing the next recession that we are going to be in the midst of in the not too distant future, if not outright depression. Because if one is going to argue what led up to the subprime crisis, which kicked off the financial crisis and Great Recession a decade ago, if people are going to say, well, it was too low interest rates for too long, well, they have been even lower for longer this time. There's even more debt now than there was a decade ago across everybody's balance sheet. Private, corporate, government. There is nowhere to hide. There is nobody with enough money to bail out this system. And now you have a president who's saying that we have to persist with those faulty economic policies. So you had the 8 years of Obama, which were, for all intents and purposes, were a disaster. He truly came in with a mandate. He really could have went down as one of the greatest presidents ever. I truly believe that because of the environment in which he began. He could have said, you know what? Free market capitalism is America. That's what we stand for. He could have said no to the bailouts on Wall Street. He could have said no to the bailouts of major corporations. All of the malinvestment that was built up over the course of the 2000s and even the 1990s could have been wiped out, and we could have had a fresh start. It would have been painful, yes, but what we are going to see is going to be even more painful, unfortunately. So you have this situation, you have this political environment, you have this social environment, you have this economic environment where people are just fed up with the Bush years and everything that took place. They are looking for a leader. Here's this young, charismatic senator from Illinois, and people gravitate towards him. They think, well, you know what, maybe we need a fresh face. Maybe we need somebody who doesn't have the experience, because maybe he's just going to come in with a great deal of ideas, and that'll be enough. And then he can surround himself with a whole host of people who have the ideas along with him, plus the experience, and they can help guide him. Okay, that's what the American people voted for. How did that work out? Unfortunately, not well at all. he proved to be a new boss, same as the old boss. So you have 8 years of the Obama administration. You have the dwindling of American power. You have the dwindling of the American economy. And then this then gives rise to another cult-like figure in Donald J. Trump. This is not Obama's fault. This is not Donald Trump's fault. This is the system's fault. This is generations of our fault as Americans who have allowed politicians to lie to us straight in the face and beat us over the head with a frying pan, with poor economic policy that has caused one problem after the next, after the next, after the next, across the entire country, whether it's the Rust Belt, whether it's the South, whether it's, it makes no difference where you are. You have suffered, or somebody in your region has suffered greatly during the latter part of the Bush years, during the Obama years, and currently now under the Trump years. What gave Trump an edge in these elections? He was the outsider. He didn't have the political experience. Obama did have some political experience. He was a senator. He did work in the Illinois legislature. So he had some political experience. Donald Trump, on the other hand, had zero political experience, at least from the standpoint of being a legislator, or anybody in the executive branch. He was not a governor. He was not a senator. He was not a congressman. Now, does he know how to play the games? Does he know how to shake hands and make some deals? Sure. But the process, no. Now, that wasn't a huge concern for me. I believe that we needed somebody to shake up the system. I believe that I was able to put aside some of the things that had we had been in a different political environment, a different economic environment, I probably would have said, you know, this guy, a little too much for me. But I looked past some of these things. I looked past some of the moral and ethical shortcomings. I looked past some of the exaggerations. I looked past some of the lies. And I said, you know what? Why? Because the system needs somebody to shake it up. We truly need somebody to drain the swamp because we have serious issues in this country. And maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump is going to be the guy to shake things up, rattle some heads, get things done once and for all, structurally, not just on the surface, not just kicking the can further down the road, but there might actually be some structural change that could take place within our government for the betterment of this country in a number of areas. Okay, so now you had the cult of personality with Obama, and sure as you know it, there were people out there, and still remain to this day, you can have conversations with people that see no wrongdoing whatsoever with the Obama administration. Anything that man said, did, touched was gold. Made no difference. And I am sure people out there who are big Trump supporters ridiculed, and rightly so, those who were obsessed and took in with the cult of personality with President Obama and his administration. They would have said, you can't do that. You have to be objective. You can't just follow somebody blindly. But now there's no question, and I have the evidence just from this ad on Facebook trying to promote a letter to the president, where you have people who support Donald Trump who think that he can do no wrong. And I guarantee you, those same people who think that Trump can do no wrong are the same people who criticized and ridiculed a lot of people who thought Obama could do no wrong. This is the danger of a cult of personality. That's why on things that exist within this current administration and with this current president, if it is something that I agree with, I defend the president. If there is something that I disagree with, I criticize, I critique, I throw my opinion, I throw my voice out there. That's what this podcast is about. That's exactly what the letter was about. I'm not here to shower this president with a whole host of flattery, although he would love flattery. It was to provide constructive criticism for the sake of this country. Not for the sake of me, not for anybody in particular, but for the sake of this country, because I understand the dangers that lurk with the cult of personality. And this country has to get away from it. That's why I tell everybody, you can't just listen to MSNBC. You can't just listen to CNN, and you cannot just listen to Fox News. You have to listen to them all, and you have to go online, and you have to find people with independent voices. You have to find investigative journalists who still exist out there, pretty much not in the mainstream media, but you have to find them on the internet, on their websites, on YouTube. You have to broaden your horizons. You have to read books on history. You can't just listen to the mainstream media all day because they are profiting from this president and his antics. And the president knows it, and the president loves it because he gets his day in the sun, which is all the time, which he loves having all the attention pointed on him, because he is basically a cult leader in a sense, just the same way that Obama was. This is not picking on them, saying that they are fully responsible for coming into this type of character. It is the fault of a system that has been in place for generations, that have made people say, you know what, I'm going to give somebody, President Obama, this guy that has virtually no experience, I'm going to let him be the president of the United States. And then there he was for 8 years. And now 8 years later, you have President Trump. Let's put Donald Trump, a guy who has no political experience, who's had some shady businesses, obviously some very successful, some went bankrupt. Hey, he's going to plate. Sometimes you hit a home run, sometimes you hit a single, sometimes you strike out. I'm not criticizing the man for that. I'm just stating the facts. Has some questionable ethical and moral character. That's true. Okay, you might not like it that I'm saying that, but that's the case. Has he turned around? Is he better? He very well could be. That's between him and his God. But nevertheless, these are the observations that you make. And then people voted for him. So, and he was up against somebody, Hillary Clinton. Love her or hate her, I definitely don't like her. She had quite the resume. Now, she didn't accomplish much, but she understood the political process. She was the First Lady. She understands how the White House works. She was Secretary of State. She was a senator from New York. So she had, unquote, the experience. Does she have any major accomplishments? No, which is why I didn't vote for the woman. Plus, she's one hell of a liar and deceiver. So I couldn't vote for her. So I voted for Donald Trump. Not because I enjoyed his exaggerations or his lies or anything like that. This system needed to be shaken up. And I thought, given the character, given the style that this president now has and employs on a daily basis, that might be able to actually shake things up in Washington, D.C. Was it going to be easy? No. It's not going to be easy. He has a hoax against him. They tried to stage a coup against this president. They tried to destroy his campaign. They tried to, and are continuing to try to destroy his presidency. Again, my hat is off to this president for continuing to move forward and still getting things done. Some I agree with, some things I don't. That's fine. That's how it should be. But nevertheless, this president is taking to Twitter. He's making comments. He's sending his people out there from within his administration out to the public to spew a lot of exaggerations, some misinformation, and some flat-out lies. And I illustrated these things in the letter to the president because I thought they were important for the sake of this country. Because we are at a crossroads. We have a government system that truly is not a representative republic, a constitutional republic. We have a cult of personality. We have people siloed in. They are dug in. If you're on the left, you despise this guy. If you're on the right and you like Trump, he can do no wrong. Both are wrong. Both are harmful to this system. That is the problem. The president is the president of the United States. He is the leader of this country. He needs to start acting like it. You know, it was one thing when you're on the campaign trail. It's another when you're just starting out as the president. You got some people slinging some arrows at you, throwing some left crosses, some uppercuts, and you want to counterpunch. I get it. I get it. But enough's enough. We have issues that are not even being discussed. We have $22 trillion in debt and counting. It's never discussed. We have Social Security and Medicare going to be insolvent, both within a decade, basically. There's no discussion on it whatsoever. We were supposed to be pulling out of Afghanistan. We're still there. We were supposed to be pulling out of Syria. We're still there. We were told we were not going to have an American empire. We were not going to be the policeman of the world because it was too expensive and other nations were not paying their fair share. which was right of the president to say. But now we are meddling in Venezuela aggressively, not even covertly anymore. It's out in the open. And now we are saber rattling with the Iranians. We just had the president, through some sort of executive order or emergency powers that are vested in him, supposedly, he overshot Congress, sidestepped Congress through this executive action, so that the United States can send and sell arms and munitions to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. So I don't think things are de-escalating anytime soon, although I hope they do. Furthermore, and getting back to the letter, I mentioned some things in regards to the economy and to the U.S.-China trade negotiations. And some comments that I received on Facebook, at least from some people who, at least it appears that they took the time to read it or listen to me read it on my podcast. I, again, advise these individuals, if they're listening to this podcast, to go back and read it again, because some of the statements were basically saying that I somehow believe that I have more information on these trade negotiations than the president. I never made such a claim, nor should that ever have been implied or inferred by them. My statement was simply the president making statements for months himself, through tweets, through press conferences, through official statements from his White House, from members of his cabinet and administration coming out and saying things were going great, fantastic, historic, and we are going to have a deal here shortly. Well, that didn't happen. So something's amiss. I simply call out the president to say, you know what, continue with your negotiations, do it in private. When somebody asks you, just say they're ongoing. Because what this president has done, and he knows what he's doing, when he makes these tweets, when he makes these statements, he knows he is moving the stock market. He knows because he has taken title to this economy and the stock market. He mentions it all the time. So I have a problem with this because I view this as an abuse of his executive powers. Because nobody can point to this Constitution, the U.S. Constitution in Article 2, and tell me where the president is some sort of economic and financial dictator. It does not exist. You never have presidents taking title and ownership to the economy and the stock market like this president does, and never making comments that move it. You can't have CEOs cannot come out to Twitter or make comments that move their stock in these types of ways. You can't. Look at Elon Musk. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is going after Elon Musk for some of the comments he has made on his company, Tesla. But somehow the president, he can move the entire global market and nobody bats an eye. Nobody questions a thing. Oh, it's fine. This is just what this guy does. He just likes to manipulate the market. He just likes to tweet out there and the markets happen to move. He knows perfectly well what he's doing. There's enough evidence to make the case. This is an abuse of his power. I'm not going to sit here and take it. This is the cult of personality. People do not care. Because whatever he can do, whatever he says is fine. That is not fine. You can't even have a constructive conversation. Look at how these arguments and these statements on my Facebook page with this ad are out there. It's truly a shame. I would have liked to have had several podcasts devoted to answering these individuals and reading some of their thoughts and opinions. I can't do that because of the language. These are adults, by the way, at least in age. Mentally, they're mental midgets. The language is, I can't even believe it. But I shouldn't be surprised because that's the state of our politics, that's the state of our country. And that's the other thing that concerns me because I do this podcast in the hopes of elevating the conversation into providing some context and some information that does not get discussed on the mainstream media or the financial mainstream media. That's why I do two podcasts. That's why I do the political, geopolitical, and that's why I do the economic. To have some other context, to actually ask some hard questions, because the mainstream media typically doesn't do it. Especially if you're somebody who's in Trump's corner, they're not going to criticize this economy. And then you have the left, which, I mean, quite frankly, is pushing for socialism, and I'm not going to stand for that. So I'm trying to find the middle ground. I'm trying to look beneath the headlines and find out what's really going on, and then relaying that information and my analysis and opinion to you. And I do that through articles and commentary. I do that through this letter to the president. I do that with these daily podcasts. But it is appalling to read the comments made from a lot of people who, again, did not read the article, my letter. They saw the headline, they saw the picture of this president, and they went to work. That's it. They love him or they hate him. This is the definition of being triggered. People, they see a picture and they respond. It's the same thing like Pavlov's dogs. You ring a bell, they start salivating because they're getting a piece of meat. We're no better than this. And that's a really unfortunate statement because that's all it is. You put a picture out there, you put a tweet out there, you put a letter out there. People don't focus on what's really going on, just like those dogs didn't realize they weren't getting fed, but they thought they were because they got tricked. That's exactly what is taking place with the American people. And so I am trying to fight on behalf of the American people as one voice, as one individual, to say we're better than this. But unfortunately, through this little experiment here of throwing out this letter on social media, it appears that many of us are not better than Pavlov's dogs and just simply being triggered. We're supposed to be higher up in the food chain than that. We're supposed to use our God-given logic. That is what's supposed to differentiate us from the rest of the animal kingdom. It appears we're no better than Pavlov's dogs. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Kritis. Godspeed.